International Organization for Standardization, ISO, was established in 1947 and is an independent, non-governmental international organization with a membership of 164 national standards bodies. ISO employs a system of technical committees and working groups to develop international standards. So, ISO 22000 is an international standard that specifies requirements for a food safety management system where an organization in the food chain needs to demonstrate compliance with food safety requirements. ISO 22000 is applicable to all organizations in the food chain, regardless of size, that want to implement systems that consistently provide safe products. The original was published in 2005, and the current edition is 2018. ISO 22000 combines generally recognized key elements to ensure food safety, interactive communication, HACCP principles, system management, and prerequisite programs. Clear communication along the food chain is essential to ensure that all relevant food safety hazards are identified and adequately controlled at each step. This implies communication upstream and downstream in the food chain. ISO 22000 combines HACCP, hazard analysis and critical control points, principles and application steps developed by Codex Alimentarius with prerequisite programs. It uses the hazard analysis to determine the strategy for hazard control. The effective production of safe products requires a detailed hazard control plan and the integration of prerequisite programs. ISO 22000 is also based on management principles that are common to ISO management systems, such as customer focus, leadership, process approach, and improvement. The most effective food safety systems are designed, operated, and updated within the framework of a structured management system and incorporated into the overall management activities of the organization. ISO 22000 is aligned with the requirements of ISO 9001 in order to enhance the compatibility of the two standards and to ease their joint or integrated implementation. Sections 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10 are all similar. It is Section 8 where there is significant difference. So ISO 22000 uses similar structure to ISO 9001 Quality Management System Standard, which should make it easier for ISO 9001 certified organizations to achieve ISO 22000 certification. This is an overall framework of the food safety management system and corresponding ISO 22000 sections in a PDCA cycle. And similarly, operational planning and control. ISO 22000 requires a combination of CCPs with operational prerequisite programs and prerequisite programs into a single integrated food safety management system. So on to the sections, and Section 1, the context of the organization. There's a new requirement to determine external and internal issues, positive and negative, that affect the organization's ability to achieve the intended results of its food safety management system. Here are some examples. And you should consider legal, technological, competitive, market, cultural, social and economic environments, cybersecurity, food fraud, food defense, intentional contamination, and knowledge and performance of the organization. Again, new in 2018, a new requirement to determine the relevant interested parties and the requirements of those interested parties. 4.3 Scope. The scope will include the products and services, processes and production sites that are included in the food safety management system that can have an influence on the food safety of products. When determining the scope, you should also consider external and internal issues referred to in 4.1 and the requirements referred to in 4.2. 4.4. The organization shall establish, implement, maintain, and update and continually improve a food safety management system. Section 5, leadership includes leadership and commitment. There's a greater emphasis on top management to demonstrate leadership and commitment by establishing a food safety policy and corresponding objectives, integration of the food safety management system requirements into the organization's business processes, providing resources, communicating, ensuring the food safety management system is evaluated and maintained, directing and supporting persons to contribute, and promoting continual improvement. There's a requirement to establish a food safety policy. The food safety policy should be communicated, understood, and applied at all levels within the organization and be available to relevant interested parties as appropriate. Five point 3 is organization roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Top management need to assign responsibilities and authorities which need to be communicated and understood. There's requirements for appointing a food safety team and a food safety team leader. And also a requirement that all persons shall have responsibility to report problems with regards to the food safety management system.
Jestem Jarobry.
Organizations should determine what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible These factors can differ substantially depending on the products and services provided. There are requirements for externally developed elements of the food safety management system, such as those provided by consultants. And new in 2018, the control of externally provided processes, products, or services. Continuing with Section 7 support, the requirements for competence and awareness. All relevant persons doing work under the organisation's control should be aware of the food safety policy, the objectives of the food safety management system relevant to their tasks, their individual contribution, and the implications of not conforming. New in 2018 again, a greater emphasis on specifying internal and external communication. There is a need to implement and maintain an effective system for communicating issues having an impact on food safety and ensure that the food safety team is informed in of changes of specified items. Documented information. The food safety management system should include documented information required by the ISO 22000 standard, documented information necessary for the effectiveness of the food safety management system, and food safety requirements required by statutory regulatory authorities and customers. The extent of documented information can differ from one organisation or another due to the size of the organisation, its type of activities, processes, products, and services, the complexity of the processes and their interactions, and the competence of persons. There's also a requirement for document control. On to Section 8, Operation. It includes 8.1, operational planning and control, prerequisite programs, traceability system, emergency preparedness and response, and the handling of emergencies and incidents. So, 8.1. There is a need to plan, implement, control, maintain, and update the processes needed to meet the requirements for the realization of safe products and to implement the actions determined in 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. Eight 8.2 is prerequisite programs. Prerequisite programs assist in controlling or preventing the introduction of food safety hazards through the work environment, eliminate, prevent, or reduce to an acceptable level the contamination of the products, including cross-contamination, to control, minimize, and or prevent food safety hazards. In clause 8.2, ISO 22000 requires that effective control measures should be in place to reduce the risk of contamination of the food when establishing PRPs. The organisation shall consider from construction, layout, buildings and associated utilities to product information, consumer awareness, and others as appropriate. We'll come back to these in a minute. The organisation shall establish, implement, maintain and update PRPs to facilitate and or prevent and or reduction of contaminants, including food safety hazards in the product processing and work environment. When selecting PRPs, the organisation should ensure that applicable statutory, regulatory, and mutually agreed customer requirements are identified. The organisation should consider the applicable part of ISO 22000 series, that's new in 2018, and applicable standards, codes of practice, and guidelines. Training. All employees that can affect product safety need to be competent to carry out their activities based on training, work experience, or qualification. So the organisation should consider the applicable part of 22002 series. For food manufacturers, these requirements are described in Technical Specification ISO TS 22001, Prerequisite Programs on Food Safety, Part 1, Food Manufacturing. This technical specification does not duplicate requirements given in ISO 22000 and is intended to be used in conjunction with ISO 22000. So, ISO 22002 Part 1 specified detailed requirements to be specifically considered in relation to ISO Clause 22000 Clause 8.2 for food manufacturing. It includes requirements for construction and layout of buildings, including requirements for environment, location of establishments, layout of premises, including internal design, layout, traffic patterns, internal structures, location of equipment, laboratory facilities, temporary mobile premises and vending machines, storage. There are requirements for utilities, air, water and energy, requirements for water supply, boiler chemical, air quality and ventilation, requirements for compressed air and other gases, for lighting. There are requirements for waste disposal, including containers for waste, waste management, and drains and drainage. There are requirements for equipment suitability, cleaning and maintenance. In that, equipment should be of hygienic design. There are requirements for product contact surfaces, requirements for temperature control, monitoring equipment, requirements for cleaning plant, utensils and equipment, and requirements for preventive or corrective maintenance. There's a section on management of purchased materials, including requirements for selection and management of suppliers, and incoming material requirements. There's a requirement for measures to prevent cross-contamination. Requirements for systems to be in place to prevent, control and detect product contamination, including allergen, microbiological and physical contamination. There are requirements for cleaning and sanitation, for cleaning and sanitizing agents and tools, cleaning and sanitizing programs, CIP, cleaning in place systems, and also for monitoring cleaning and sanitation effectiveness. There are requirements for pest control and prevention, and requirements for personal hygiene and employee facilities, such as personal hygiene facilities and toilets, canteens, workwear and protective clothing, health status, illness reporting, personal cleanliness, personal behavior. There are also other requirements for control of rework, for the storage, identification and traceability of rework, and the use of rework. There's a requirement for product recall procedures, and warehousing requirements, including those for vehicles, conveyances, and containers. There's requirements for product information and consumer awareness. Product information should be presented to consumers in such a way to enable them to understand its importance and make informed choices. And finally, there's requirements for food defense, biovigilance, and bioterrorism. Management need to assess the hazard to products posed by potential acts of sabotage, vandalism, or terrorism, and put in place proportional protective methods, including access controls. So, when selecting or establishing PRPs, the food safety team will need to consider and utilize appropriate information such as statutory and regulatory requirements, customer requirements, recognized guidelines, codex principles and codes of practice, national, international, or sector standards. The prerequisite programs will need to be appropriate and implemented across the entire production system and be approved by the food safety team. Traceability requirements. A traceability system should be in place to identify incoming material from the suppliers and the first stage of distribution route to the end product. There's also requirements for emergency preparedness and response. Top management shall ensure procedures are in place to respond to potential emergency situations or incidents that can have an impact on food safety. There's also a new requirement in 2018 for handling of emergencies and incidents. So on to hazard control and preliminary steps. To carry out hazard analysis, preliminary documented information shall be collected, maintained, and updated by the food safety team. This shall include, but not limited to, applicable regulations and customer requirements, the organization's products, processes, and equipment, food safety hazards relevant to the food safety management system. So, all raw materials, ingredients, and product contact materials shall be described in documents to the extent needed to conduct the hazard analysis. The characteristics of end products shall be described in documents to the extent needed to conduct the hazard analysis. Intended use. The intended use, the reasonably expected handling of the end product, and any unintended but reasonably expected mishandling and misuse of the end product shall be considered and shall be described in documents to the extent needed to conduct the hazard analysis. Flow diagrams. The food safety team shall prepare flow diagrams. The flow diagrams shall then be confirmed for accuracy on site by the food safety team and retained as documented information. Description of processes and process environment. The food safety team shall describe to the extent needed to conduct the hazard analysis, the layout of the premises, including food handling and non-food handling areas, processing equipment, contact material, processing aids, and flow of materials, existing PRPs, process parameters, control measures, and the strictness to which they are applied, all procedures that can influence food safety, and also external requirements. Onto hazard analysis. The food safety shall conduct a hazard analysis based on the preliminary information. The food safety team shall identify and document all food safety hazards that are reasonably expected to occur in relation to the type of product, type of process, and process environment. The food safety team shall identify steps such as receiving, processing, distribution, at which each food safety hazard can be present, can be introduced, can increase, or can persist. Food safety hazards are identified and recorded by the food safety team based on experience.
Так, на первую практическую занятие мы сейчас остановим, потому что время вышло у нас. А вторая у нас будет 16:20. Тогда